Dave Talks Comics, Episode 71, Power Girl. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comic books and cartoons, I will probably spoil them in some way. Back in December 2012, I bought a collection of trade paperbacks all on Power Girl, or at least all related to Power Girl. Through the 11 O'Clock Comics message boards, I probably could look and see who I bought them from, but I'm not sure that's really relevant. I don't really recall. The first of these is just titled Power Girl, and I believe this came out in 2006. It collects a few different stories, and it's kind of a look at who Power Girl is or who she's been up to this point. Power Girl is, of course, is a kind of an alternate Supergirl. In the old DC comics, she was the Supergirl, basically, of Earth 2. She first appeared in All-Star Comics number 58, which was the revival of All-Star Comics, the 1970s revival. Of course, All-Star Comics back in the 1940s was where the Justice Society of America first appeared. And then when the Justice Society stopped running in All-Star Comics, they changed the title to All-Star Western. It became a Western book. And so the numbering continued from there. But then in the 70s, they picked up the numbering where they'd left off with the Justice Society stories. And they did about another 20 or 30 issues, something like that. And there's a couple collections of them that are good. Although I like the first collection more than the other. And I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here. But anyway, Power Girl first appeared there. Like I said, she's basically the Earth 2 version of Supergirl. She has a different costume, but she's also blonde, wears a cape. But she doesn't wear an S symbol. And I think like Supergirl, she arrived, unlike Superman, she arrived fully grown on Earth. And her parents had launched her from, I believe, Krypton in hopes that she would survive the explosion of Krypton. And she is Superman's cousin, just like in Earth 2, just like Supergirl is in the Earth 1 universe. So this collection, like I said, it collects basically 3 stories. 2 of them are multi-part. One of them's just a one-shot. I'd read parts of some of these before. Actually, I'd read one of them in whole and parts of the others before. The first story is from Showcase numbers 97 through 99. I believe I have Showcase number 97, but I don't think I'd read it, but I had never read the other 2 parts from issues 98 and 99. This is by Paul Levitz, was the writer, and then Joe Staton and Joe Orlando are the artists. And there's basically each issue is its own story, although there is, some continuity between them. There's a character introduced here named Andrew Vinson, who's a journalist who works at the Gotham Globe, which I guess means these stories take place in Gotham. I'm not sure why she isn't in Metropolis. I don't know why she has to be in Metropolis, but Superman's in Metropolis. But why Gotham? Why not some other city? I don't know. But Andrew Vinson was a journalist. Like I said, he worked for the Gotham Globe. He's introduced in this story He also appeared in the Generation story in Infinity Incorporated, which I talked about in Dave Talks Comics episodes 18, 23, and 25. And that was Infinity Inc. issues 1 through 10, and the Generation Saga, I think. Or maybe it's just the Generation story. He also appeared, I think, in an issue or two of Wonder Woman. He also appeared in America vs. the JSA, which I have, and I read it years ago, and I want to reread it, but I have not gotten to that yet. And I think, as far as I can tell, he did not really appear in any other stories. I'm looking right now on Comic Book DB, and he appeared in another issue of Infinity Inc. after the saga. Oh, and he appeared in an issue of Convergence, this new Action Comics, which I'm not reading the current comic books, but that's interesting because that's the first time he's shown up in a comic book in something like 20 years. No, actually more like 30 years, since 1985. From 1985 to 2015. Wow. Okay. So you've got a few stories. He figures into two of those issues 97 and 98. Power Girl fights against the Brainwave. The Flash shows up. The Green Lantern shows up. I guess the significance of this story is it's her first solo story. And there's this weird story where she has to battle the spaceship that brought her to Earth, because it was programmed to protect her, it now thinks the best way to protect her is to trap her, and it tries to put her into like a state of tries to put her to sleep and keep her safe, and so she has to fight back against the ship. And then the final issue is Brainwave. That's issue 99, in which also the Green Lantern, and of course that's Alan Scott, and the Flash, Jay Garrick. These are, of course, Earth 2 characters, because at this point Earth 2 was still alive and kicking. This was before Crisis on Infinite Earths. They were all battling the Brainwave in this issue. And the Brainwave has these soldiers who I think also appeared in some issues of All-Star Comics. These uniforms they wear look familiar from that All-Star revival, which started with All-Star Comics 57 or 58. I'm not sure which. So that's the story and it's an okay story. It's not great. If you're a completist, if you want to read all of, Power Girl's early appearances, or if you've never read this, then maybe it's something you'd want to check out. Otherwise, I don't know. There's nothing too special about this story. Oh, yes, one of the other things. This is where it's introduced, and I'm not sure how much they've kept up with this, but that Power Girl was a software expert. And she gets a job in one of these issues working for UCC, that's Universal Computer Corporation, because she's, like I said, a software expert. And how did she become a software expert? Well, Wonder Woman gave her this, or let her use this memory teacher device, which overnight taught her all about software. And then later in the story, in the last story, in issue 99 of Showcase, she actually saves the day by using her software skills to bring Gotham back to the same universe because it had been transported to another universe or another dimension by the brainwave. And I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know exactly how her skills managed to save the day, but that's the story. The other issue, then there's a one-shot. Now, this is from Secret Origins number 11, which appeared in 1986. This was, Secret Origins was a series that started coming out after Crisis on Infinite Earths. I believe it was after. It may have started coming out during Crisis on Infinite Earths. But the idea was to retell all these origins since they just changed everything. And this issue featured Hawkman and Power Girl. And I've got this issue, and I don't really have a clear recollection of reading it. I certainly don't have a recollection of reading the story, the Power Girl story. And I got to be honest, I wasn't crazy about this Power Girl story. But this recasts her origin because of course originally she was from Krypton, but now in the new universe, in the new DC universe in 86, she was no longer from Krypton. Now she was the granddaughter of Arion of Atlantis, who lived like 10,000 years, I think it was, before the 20th century, something like that. So this is kind of telling her new origin, and this is the first time, I believe, that this new origin had been told. And honestly, it's the first time I can remember reading this, and it's the first time that I really knew anything about this. That post, because I really didn't read a whole lot of DC Comics post-Crisis. So you know, big disappointment, but not. The story was by Paul Kupperberg, wrote it, and Mary Wilshire was the artist. Let me see if there's anything here from my notes that I. Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. She's the granddaughter of Arion, Lord of Atlantis, who lived 10,000 years ago. But then she was sent into the future because Arion had a battle with his brother who was evil and something like that. But that's basically the story. It doesn't even take up the full issue. Although I think those issues of Secret Origins were double-sized. I don't think that they were. So it may have been like a 20-page story or a 16-page story, but let's see what I can find here on Comic Book DB about this story from Secret Origins number 11, which the cover date was February of 87. The series started in 86. Let's see, does it list a page count here? It does not. Anyhow, that's okay. So that's the second, and then the final story I had read before in full, and that is from JSA Classified issues 1 through 4, and I bought those and read them actually before I bought this collection, and I wouldn't have I bought the individual issues because I'd done some research online and I couldn't find anything to indicate that they'd ever been collected anywhere. And this was 2012, and this volume came out in 2006, so I don't know why I couldn't. Wherever I looked, it didn't indicate that they'd been reprinted. So, but this was a kind of weird story. This is the first time that Amanda Conner drew, and I believe Jimmy Palmiotti was the writer on this as well, but that Amanda Conner drew Power Girl, and that was part of the reason why I bought these trades, because I was interested in the Amanda Conner drawn stories of Power Girl. I really hadn't read much. I'd seen pictures that she'd drawn online, covers and whatnot, and it was, it was not written by Jimmy Palmiotti, although he did ink these stories. It was written by Jeff Johns. Okay. And these were supposed to be some sort of a tie-in to Infinite Crisis, I think. Something like that. Although this whole collection is listed as an Infinite Crisis tie-in, which I never read Infinite Crisis. I read Identity Crisis, and I read Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I never read Infinite Crisis. I'm not big on those event books. Anyway, this series, this story, this 4-parter, kind of mirrors. Well, I don't know. It's once again, it's an exploration of who Power Girl is and who she's been, and you get her origin arriving on Earth, or you get the original origin of her arriving on Earth back in, I guess, which was from the 1970s. But there's hallucinations throughout this, and it's kind of her trying to figure out who she is, because I think they redid things under Infinite Crisis, and I think that's when they brought back the multiverse, and so you get this. So you get you get Amanda Conner's art, which is very sexy and very risque, and I don't know, maybe that's putting it a little too strong. But certainly that was part of the draw here. And so the first issue, the first part of this 4-part story kind of delves into her Atlantean origin. And the thing is that throughout this she's having hallucinations and she's attacking ghosts and nobody else can see what she's attacking. And eventually you learn that it's the psychopirate who's behind all this. Now, I'm not sure how the psychopirate manages to do that. I think there's more to it than just the psychopirate, actually. Because the psychopirate can affect people's emotions, but I don't think he can cause them to hallucinate. So in this issue, she sees I guess it would be her uncle, her evil uncle, or her evil great uncle, Arion's evil brother. And so she thinks she's fighting him, but then she realizes she's just smashing up the city. And the second issue was kind of interesting because the Legion of Superheroes shows up in that issue. And now this was something I knew nothing about, but apparently in the Legion of Superheroes run from 1995 to 1998, there was a character named Andromeda, who was a Daxamite, which I believe is the same race that Mon-El is, who's kind of like Superboy, except for instead of being affected, instead of his weakness being kryptonite, it's lead. And I read some of the Legion of Superheroes back in the day, not a lot. Some of the Great Darkness saga around that period I was reading a little bit, but I didn't really stick with it. I have a couple trades of the Legion of Superheroes, but by the 90s I really wasn't reading comic books much at all. I certainly was not reading the Legion of Superheroes. I had no idea who this Andromeda character was, but it looks like she looks similar to Power Girl, and I don't know if it was ever implied at that point that she was supposed to be Power Girl. I mean, similar in the sense that she's blonde, she's strong, that sort of, looks a little bit like Power Girl, but, but she wore a completely different outfit. And, of course, the Legion of Superheroes is set in the 30th or the 31st century. So this was kind of interesting. So they kind of imply, basically she starts hallucinating in this second issue, thinking that she's seeing members of the Legion of Superheroes, and they keep calling her Andromeda, and she's completely confused by this. And at first it's just the original 3 members of the Legion, Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, and Saturn Girl, and then other members of the Legion show up. And once again, these are hallucinations. Nobody else can see this other than her. And it's really throwing her for a loop, and she's going kind of nutso. And it's in this issue at the end where it's revealed that the Psychopirate is behind this all, which once again, I didn't think he had the power to cause people to hallucinate. Then in the third issue, you get the Huntress comes into this, and the Huntress was kind of Power Girl's friend. They were kind of a team, and as I understand it, they've become a team again in the last year or two. But they were kind of a team back in the Justice Society revival days in All-Star Comics back in the late 70s. And but the Huntress, but that's kind of something that's been retconned, and so the Huntress doesn't know who Power Girl is, and they fight. It looks like some guys from the Brotherhood of Evil, who I recall from the New Teen Titans. Yes, they fought the New Teen Titans back in the day. Let's see, what else was there in this issue? Oh, and then you have, some members of the Crime Syndicate show up, and at one point it's implied that she is supposed to be on Earth 3, and this is, and then there's some other characters show up, who I don't know if these have ever appeared before, who claim that she's their daughter, who claim that she's their mother, and all these weirdo characters like Captain Marvel, Shazam shows up, and I don't know if this stuff has been played anywhere before, but at the end of this issue, I think Lex Luthor shows up, and he has something to do with this. But the final issue is kind of a confrontation between Power Girl and Psychopirate, and Ma Hunkel shows up in this issue, the original Red Tornado. You get to see there's a great splash page that has the entire Justice Society as they appeared back in the revival back in the 70s, and you get further origin stories. You get Psycho Pirate's origin. Psycho Pirate's kind of interesting because because there was two of them, and I never realized that there was two Psycho Pirates. And the Psycho Pirate stories that I always think of are there's three stories other than this one. Of course, he played a big role in Crisis, or a pivotal role in Crisis on Infinite Earths. He also played an important part in the Ultra Saga, which I covered in some previous issues of Dave Talks Comics, which was All-Star. Well, I think he only appeared in All-Star Squadron issues 26 and then Annual 2, but that ran from issues 21 through 26 plus Annual 2. And then before that, he was in Justice League of America issues 195 to 197, which was a classic story. I believe it's collected in one of the issues, one of the collections, the Crisis on Multiple Earths issues, which collect all of the Justice League, Justice Society team-up stories. And that was one in which really, in a way, leads right into the Ultra Saga from the Ultra Saga from All-Star Squadron. And I think it was written by Jerry Conway, I think, and it was certainly drawn by George Perez. And it's a story in which the Ultra Humanite, and I believe that was the first time he appeared in that giant white ape appearance, had gotten together a bunch of villains from, I think, mostly Earth 2, but maybe there were also some from Earth 1. The Ragdoll, the Monocle, the Signal Man, the Floronic Man, the Psycho Pirate, and there was probably a couple, the Mist, and I thought it was a great story, and I went back and I didn't read it when it first came out, but when I saw the All-Star Squadron story, and they made references to it, I went back and got it back then, back in the early 80s, and I think it's a really good story. And it doesn't hurt that George Perez is the one who drew it. So that kind of wraps up my talk on this volume of Power Girl. Like I said, it's kind of more of a thing. I'm not crazy about that last story. I mean, it kind of makes sense better in the larger context if you're trying to learn more about who Power Girl is and what her background is, although she's one of those characters like Hawkman who's had her background change a number of times. But so I don't think it's essential reading for everybody. It's not a classic. It's not a great story that most people would probably enjoy. I think it's more of something to find, and I'm not sure that this volume is still in print, to be perfectly honest. It might be. But it's just called Power Girl. And on the spine, the credits are Johns, Connor, Levitz, and Staten. And of course, Amanda Connor would go on to draw more of Power Girl, and those are the other volumes that I picked up, and I will talk about those in the next installment on Power Girl. That's it for episode 71 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. On Twitter at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, well, I'm not sure exactly what the next episode will be, but let me give you a preview of some things I want to cover on upcoming episodes. I've read more of Alpha Flight. I've read more of All-Star Squadron, and I want to cover those. I think I'm going to stick with JLU as far as my cartoon coverage. I keep changing the way I'm doing things, and it's funny because as I read some of these old comic books, in particular All-Star Squadron, Roy Thomas would talk about his plans and about what was going to happen. And some of these things I know never happened, or they didn't happen exactly the way he said they were going to happen. And I kind of feel that way with this podcast to talk about stuff I'm going to cover, like I was talking in previous episodes how I was going to cover Young Justice. At this point, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I want to focus on JLU. I want to do one more episode on season 2, and then I want to cover season 3, and that'll be it for JLU. And then maybe I'll cover Young Justice. I don't know. Also, I'm watching Daredevil. I'm watching Arrow. I'm close to halfway through the first season of Arrow. I think 5 episodes into Daredevil at this point. I'm only watching an episode a week. Same for Arrow, which is why it's taking me so long. And while I'll probably never be caught up until long after the series have ended. Well, I guess I'll catch up to season 1 of Daredevil. But I'm enjoying them all, but I don't see myself talking about them on this podcast. Maybe I'll post something on Facebook. I don't know. And then I'm going to some conventions. Coming up next weekend, if this episode comes out as scheduled, next weekend, May 16 and 17, I will be at the Appleseed Comic-Con. I'll be there all day on the 16th and just part of the day on the 17th. And, of course, I'll just be walking around, buying stuff. I've already paid for one commission, and maybe I'll get a few others. There's a couple of artists whose I've got my eye on. I looked through all the artists they had listed there, and it's not a huge list. And there's a few there that they're doing stuff that looks interesting. And who knows, there may be some artists there who weren't on the list or who didn't have a very good website, but whose tables or what they have on display at the show may impress me. So that's about it for this episode of Dave Talks Comics. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.